Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, home of all things stock, investment, and personal finance related. Now for today's video, we've got a really special one for you. We've got Sue Ennis back from HUD8 Corp. She heads up their IR team. Obviously a lot going on in relation to HUD8 over the last week or so on the backs of that J Capital article. And today we've got the HUD8 Corp response, a number of questions from the viewers and subscribers that we're going to be talking through with Sue in today's presentation. But before we do, please take a second, hit the like button, you guys. It's a big help to myself and the channel. It really helps get this content to other people like yourself who may find value. In addition, if you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join the community. We'd love to have you. And on top of that, you guys, if you have any questions about the merger, about the J Capital report, anything we didn't cover in today's presentation, leave it in the comment section below. We'll be sure to get you an answer or cover in our next discussion. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, we've got a really exciting one for you. Sue Ennis, she's been on the channel a number of times. They just went through the big merger with USBTC. Obviously, some big news came out last week in relation to the J Capital report. So we wanted to welcome Sue back to give us an update from HUD8 Corp's perspective, talk through some of the questions that we solicited from the audience, and get a bit of an update on the post-merger business and operations as well. So Sue, thanks so much for being here. I can only imagine how busy you've been, and we really appreciate your time.
Hey, super happy to be here. It's been a really wild week, and so it's super important to us that we continue to connect with you guys and communicate with you guys during, some of these hard periods.
Yeah, of course. And that's the great thing about this outlet, you guys. We were just talking about that off camera, but it's a great way to get information directly from the company, which is exactly what we're going to do. Now, we're going to talk about the J Capital report in a second here, but before we do, we had a couple of questions about operations, Sue, so I wanted to jump right in. Now, I know you've been on a handful of times, but for anyone who's missed those presentations, can you give us the elevator pitch or a very high-level summary of just what HUD8 Corp is all about post-merger?
Yeah, so post-merger, HUD8, we executed one of the largest M&As, actually the largest M&A in the crypto industry. So we went from being a miner out of Canada, a Bitcoin miner out of Canada who had 5 traditional data centers, to now a US domiciled Bitcoin miner, high performance computing, and then also having a really interesting new business called managed services. So effectively moving away from being a single threaded miner with a high performance computing angle to a Bitcoin miner with a portfolio of fiat based business lines that we think have a really tremendous upside and total addressable market to keep us competitive and help reduce our cost per coin post the next halving.
Yeah, amazing. And I know we've talked about these alternative revenue streams. We're starting to see a lot of the other miners actually follow suit. HUD was really a pioneer in that space and getting into some revenue streams that aren't so reliant or dependent on the price of Bitcoin itself. So we'll talk about some of the HPC towards the end if we have some time. But one of the questions that came up here, Sue, is in relation to your self-mining business. Fleet upgrade plans. We've seen a number of other companies announce big option purchase agreements or purchase agreements for the S21, the T21. What's HUD8's plan to get the self-mining, upgraded moving into halving?
Yeah, so right now we're sitting at about 7.2 exahash of self-mining. And I think what's pretty exciting is we just announced about a week and a half ago that we purchased a substation out of Salt Creek, Texas. That's front of the meter, 65 megawatts plus an additional 1.9 acres of land for us to potentially build on. And we also are scheduled to close on February 15th, another 310 megawatts worth of power plants up here in Canada from a bankruptcy proceeding, a stalking horse bid that we put our hat in the ring for. So I think when you're looking obviously at the mining space, particularly the self-mining piece of our business, machines are incredibly important, but power is the new oil. And so one of the things we've been focused on is how do we continue to grow that portfolio of owned power? Because right now what we're seeing on the equipment side of things is we're not seeing an issue of supply chain constraints that we saw before the last bull market. We're not seeing crazy price increases. So for example, in 2021, we saw bull market pricing of like $80 to $90 per terahash, versus now you can get an S21 for about $16 per terahash. So I think in terms of bed mass, like the order of operations, what we've been focused on since we've closed has been, let's secure that power, let's get that portfolio of PPAs, continuing on its trajectory of growth. And then we'll announce our fleet upgrade as soon as possible. I'd obviously love to remind your audience that we have over 7,000 Bitcoin on our balance sheet that is unencumbered, and over 9,000 Bitcoin total. We've got a little bit of it held as collateral with a loan we have with Coinbase. So that's 7,000 Bitcoin that we could potentially, if we decide to, use towards reinvesting in the business. And I think one of the things that's really changed, and sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but it's going to answer your question ultimately. One of the things that's really changed since the spot Bitcoin ETF has been approved, and this is something that we're thinking about, is all of those institutions that didn't have an option for Bitcoin proxy, for a Bitcoin proxy play, who were in mining equities, or for example, MicroStrategy or Coinbase, now have an option where they can get commodity exposure without company risk, right? And when you're investing in a miner, you have commodity risk, but then you also have company risk as an institutional investor. And so our thinking is the premium that we may have been getting for having a HODL on our balance sheet, it still sort of remains to be seen if we're still going to be given that premium in the market. I mean, obviously we've only had it's been barely a week of trading for the spot Bitcoin ETF, and we're seeing a lot of outflows because of Grayscale GBTC investors taking profits. So I think we still really need to see sort of where the market lands in terms of appetite for these spot Bitcoin ETFs. But our thinking is, if this HODL premium is no longer there, this is an incredible war chest. This is a huge treasury that we have to potentially reinvest in the business. So when you ask about equipment, that's sort of my long-winded answer of saying that, we think we've got we'll certainly update you guys as soon as possible. That the fleet upgrades is a super important part to having a competitive self-mining business. But those are sort of the things that we've been thinking of and focused on since we've merged. We've only been merged entity for like 7 weeks. And it's that power portfolio that we think is the most important part.
7 weeks, and I'm sure it feels like a lifetime, eh, Sue? No, I appreciate your response. And what I'm hearing from that is you guys have really prioritized access to power, understanding that the machine costs are pretty reasonable right now. And then you'll fill up the power with the machines using that war chest if and when you deem necessary, hey?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not me confirming that we've officially pivoted from HODL strategy, but I'm just telling you sort of how we're thinking now that there's a spot Bitcoin ETF. It sort of has, it's certainly something that we're now thinking of in terms of, where is the future of HODL, and should we be reinvesting it back in the business? Should we continue taking out loans against it? I guess my point is that because we're one of the OG hodlers in the space, we're in a super advantageous place right now by having this massive asset on our balance sheet that we can get super agile with.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And things have been very choppy since ETF approval. We've had days Bitcoin's up, miners are down, Bitcoin's down, miners are up like yesterday. So I think it's very smart that you guys are re-looking at that strategy. And again, not necessarily making any decisions, but reevaluating those premiums now that there's a new option for the institutions, obviously the ETF. Now, Sue, that's a great segue. Another question we got was in relation to the debt situation and repayment strategy. We've talked to a lot of companies that are really aggressively paying down debt going into the halving. You just alluded to some of the financing options or optionality that Hut 8 Corp has. Can you give us any insight on the debt situation post-merger and repayment plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, our Q4 pro forma, consolidated financials are going to be out in March. But I can certainly speak to the debt as per what's been filed out there on Edgar with each company respectively. As at Q3, you're looking at about 190 million-ish worth of debt, and the majority of that is associated with our Coinbase loan and also with our King Mountain JV. So we're a 50% owner in the King Mountain substation. And the monthly and the proceeds from that substation are being swept monthly to pay down the interest and the note on this particular debt. There's no minimum monthly payments. The structure of the deal is on a JV level, so there's no parent company recourse. And then we also have the Coinbase loan, and then we've got a little bit of money outstanding, or loan outstanding for equipment purchase that US Bitcoin Corp did with Anchorage. But I think, if you look at that debt and how it's structured, as I said, it's the King Mountain JV is not structured on a parent company level. It's on a JV level, so there's no recourse to the parent company. We are sweeping it and paying it down monthly. And then I think if you look at our total assets relative to that amount, as of the pro forma that we released on June 30th, we had about 713 million in total assets. At that time, 290 million of that 713 million was Bitcoin. Since then, if we look at where Bitcoin is today, that's actually ballpark more in the 350-ish value of Bitcoin on our balance sheet. If you're taking what we have on our balance sheet as of what we disclose relative to the price of Bitcoin today. So again, we are very comfortable with the strength of our balance sheet and our strategy for managing all these different levers.
Gotcha. And the balance sheet strength and that HODL position is a recurring theme we've talked about for years now, Sue. So it's nice to see that strategy paying off when you've got halving coming up and obviously all these different plans within the organization. So I appreciate the comments there. We'll keep an eye for that full pro forma quarterly report as well. Now, the other one I saw you were getting some heat for on Twitter or X was some insider selling. So I know Jamie, the CEO, sold off some shares. I saw your response to that, but maybe for people who didn't, can you give us a little bit of color as to why that sale happened, what that was all about? And then as a follow-up, based on the share price and some of the activity we've seen, are you guys feeling this is getting into value territory? And can we expect to see any insider buying here coming up?
Okay, so great question. Jamie did not sell her shares for a profit in the market. This is an automated sell to cover program that is an industry standard to cover only the tax portion of vested RSUs, because vesting is a taxable event. So it's an automated program. That's how we've set it up with our LTIP provider. It's so funny that the market is only focusing on Jamie's sell, because I also had a huge tranche of RSUs that vested on December 10th. So if you look, you'll also probably see, Sue Ennis is also selling her shares. We are not. I have not sold my shares. That was a vested tax. That was a taxable event, and the tax portion of my vested RSUs being sold. So I really appreciate you asking that question, because for sure that would certainly, if I were, I am a shareholder, my family is shareholders, that would make me question. But that is what's happening with what you're seeing on the disclosures or on the filings.
Yeah, and I wanted to add some color there. That's exactly how things can be misconstrued in the media, you guys. There's a lot of these programs and systems I know from my corporate background that are set up, they're automated, they're recurring, they're scheduled. But from an outside perspective, Sue, you know as well as I do, people can kind of pick and choose which elements they focus on. The second part was in terms of insider buying. And I know your kind of hands are tied here, but do you feel share price is getting in kind of a value territory where we may start to see some of that insider, as we've seen with TeraWolf and some of your competitors?
Yeah, so I certainly obviously can't comment on where I think the share price is right now. I can tell you that as per US securities law, we are in earnings blackout, which means that insiders can't buy when you're in earnings blackout. And that's the most I can talk about, because I am very bullish on this company. And, obviously I want to stay on the right side of US securities law. So I unfortunately couldn't make any moves that I would have liked to make. So.
No problem. We all want to stay on the right side of securities law. And even that, Sue, letting us know about the blackout, that may kind of calm or quell some of the confusion out there as well. So I appreciate your transparency. Now on to the main event. So J Capital report came out last week, really shook things up. You guys were out in New York ringing the opening bell, I believe, as this kind of was going down. So before we get into your response, Sue, can you tell us kind of what this is about, what you know about this firm? I know they're self-proclaimed short sellers on their website. I'll bring up kind of a little bit of the article as we talk through it here, but what's your initial take on this?
Yeah, so I think, what I'm comfortable talking about right now is this short hedge funds and research shops like J Capital are examples of short and distort, which is an illegal practice where an investor shorts a stock and then decides to spread rumors in an attempt to drive down the stock price so that they can cover their short, ultimately destroy shareholder value, but equals financial gain for them. J Capital they had to settle in 2021 with another issuer, and they were forced to publicly apologize to the issuer, Vulcan Energy, I believe it was. You can look it up on Google. And they were permanently restrained from publishing any research on the company or any of its directors because they were found to be in a situation of short and distort. I think the American Bankers Association has also come out in May of 2023 in condemning the practice and how this practice does ultimately fall on shareholders who are the victims of this predatory behavior. And I think one of the things that's tough is, if a hedge fund takes a short position in your company, obviously what they're betting on is that your share price goes down, and they're betting on negative news and that they can ultimately cover their position, on you doing a deal or whatever. It's tough to see what else was going on behind the scenes, but I think in the case of HUT, you've now got a strengthened company, almost over a gigawatt of power under management. We still have that, war chest of Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And I think the market was really starting to see that this is a new era for HUT. We are one of the largest players out there now. And so perhaps that, that created some incentive for some distortion by some players who perhaps didn't have that thesis on HUT. But I think in terms of our response to this, so we issued a holding statement. And I just want to give you a little bit of sort of insight as to why we're managing our response to this the way that we've been managing it thus far. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our board and who is our board. So you guys know Jamie, you know me, but you don't know our board really. So I'm going to highlight three of them. Well, maybe four of them actually in particular that I think the market needs to know to get a sense as to why we're sort of rolling the way we're rolling right now in terms of our response to this. So let's go over Rick Rickardson. So Rick Rickardson is one of the most powerful players in the private equity space in the US. He's been in the private equity space for over 40 years. He's written financial books that have been endorsed by David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, the former Secretary of Defense for the US, and even Michael Lewis. And he's now sort of his side passion is producing movies in Hollywood. He produced King Richard with Will Smith. We then have Bill Tai on our board, who is a famous venture capitalist out of the US. He has had over 22 companies that he has seeded and backed in the early stages go public, including Zoom and Canva. And then we also have Mayo Shattuck on our board, who is the ex-CEO and chairman of one of the largest renewable energy companies in the US. And he was there for decades. And he now sits on the board of Capital One, which is an American bank, and the Gap. And then we have Alexia Hefty, who's one of the most well-connected women in the Middle East in the governance space, and is and she's also a special advisor for the government of Bermuda. So where I'm going with this is if you look at the credibility and the track record and the experience of our board, our decision is that, again, number one, this isn't our board's first rodeo, and that we don't just issue knee-jerk reactions to allegations made by parties who have disclosed they're going to benefit from shareholder destruction and a decline in our stock. So that's where we're at on that. I know I'm not answering the question that in a way that you'd like it to be answered. And again, we'll update the market as soon as we can. But I really want to point to the tenure and the experience of our board in terms of why and how we're managing this situation, obviously with Jamie as well. But that's sort of some of the philosophical drivers and minds behind sort of how we're playing this, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense, and I'm glad you added some color. And I know just from the amount of time this transaction took, there was a lot of due diligence that went into it. There's a lot of smart people involved with it. And adding some color to your board and their background, I think definitely helps the situation. Sue, I did see that state.
Just really quickly, that's also a really good point. We had, as per our S4, which is disclosed. I'm happy to send it to you if you have any of your audience who wants to Read it. It's on Edgar. We had 2 fairness opinions in this deal. We're in the process of closing a JV with Macquarie for those power plants. So Macquarie obviously has also been part of the due diligence with us. We had bankers on both sides of the transaction. We had lawyers on both sides of the transaction. And if you want more, again, insight into the due diligence that we did into this deal, that is all in our S4. DM me on Twitter @BigSuey if you want me to send you the link to that S4. I'll also send it to Bryce here. But yeah, we felt very comfortable with our level of due diligence on as per our S4 disclosure. So
sure. Yeah, no, understandable, Sue, and I appreciate you shedding as much light as you can. Now, a couple additional J Capital related questions here for you, and I did see that response. I actually was happy as a shareholder how that came across is, hey, you know what, guys, we're taking a calculated approach. We're taking it seriously. We're looking into it. But at the same time, we're going to focus on running the business as we always have. I thought that was a very mature way to handle it, really. The next question I had, though, Sue, is obviously there's a number of fairly serious allegations in that report. Is there any merit to any of that? Or when will we be seeing kind of a full rebuttal to those individual points?
yeah, I think, as per that original press release, we will certainly update the market as we see fit. But I think also as to the point that you just mentioned, our focus right now is really on execution. You guys need to see numbers, you need to see performance, you need to see results, you need to see growth of revenues, growth of cash flows. That's where our head is at right now versus, again, continuing to put more light on a company that stands to destroy shareholder values. So
yeah, and at the end of the day, sorry, Sue, what was that?
I was just gonna say that's the best I can sort of shed light on right now. And again, we'll keep you guys updated as soon as we can.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie at the end of the day, and we'll see the proof is in the pudding here, or not, as the quarterly reports come out. Now, final question, it is numbers related. So one of the specific numbers that they threw out was a break-even cost of about $60,000 per Bitcoin. Now, keep in mind, guys, this is a simple calculation. They basically took all the costs divided by the Bitcoin. There's alternate revenue streams at play here. So Anthony and I spoke over this and had some thoughts. But Sue, do you guys know your all-in kind of cash cost per Bitcoin? Not necessarily your break even, but cash cost?
Yeah, so we did not do a pro forma Q3 financials because we weren't closed yet. So US Bitcoin Corp filed their Q3 financials, Hut 8 filed their Q3 financials. So Hut 8's all-in cash costs as at Q3 were about 20.6 thousand US, 20,000-ish US per coin. And then US Bitcoin Corp's was a little bit like 19 and a half cost per coin, and that includes T&D, does not include amortization and depreciation. And then, yeah, I think certainly, I urge investors to please go look at the filings yourself. If you ever want to book a one-on-one with me to walk through those financials, I'm happy to do it @BigSuey on Twitter. Shoot me a DM. I may actually do a retail investor call soon on this as well. But yeah, just please check our financials if you do your own research, DYOR, in situations like this.
Yeah, and the low to mid 20s is pretty standard for the industry, you guys. That number's a lot more consistent with some of the peers. So wanted to definitely touch on that. The other thing before we let you go, Sue, I know we're on a little bit of a time crunch here, but HPC, so that is an example of one of your alternate revenue streams. You guys announced Interior Health. It was a huge client. Now, we've, again, heard some mixed comments from the peer group over HPC, AI businesses potentially being a flash in the pan moment. Personally, I don't necessarily agree with that after seeing some of the revenue projections and agreements and contracts that have been signed. Can you give us a bit of an update on HPC? I know Bit Digital just announced they're starting to receive revenue for their big contract. Is there anything else we can expect on that side of the house?
Yeah, so I think one of the differentiators in terms of Hut 8's HPC strategy relative to any of our competitors is that we actually bought 5 traditional data, like cloud and colo data centers. And that deal came with a little over 250 customers in the cloud, colo, special effects, financial services, AI. There's also AI capabilities. We've got A40s sitting in there. And so this wasn't just a concerted direct line to AI play that we were doing. This was a more thoughtful, uncorrelated revenue strategy. And we're earning about $3.5 million a quarter on this business. For sure, as we've disclosed in our S4, making purchases for AI GPUs is something that we did put that order out there for H100s. And I think one of the benefits of Hut 8 and the way that we've set up our portfolio of infrastructure and power is that we can pivot and be agile. So, for example, some of these power plants that we hope to close on February 15th. There is the ability to stand up self-mining or stand up HPC. I think how we look at our business now is, what is the best spend of the electron? What is the ROIC? Where is the highest revenue and margin profile for this electron, given where our infrastructure or power portfolio is. So I'm not really answering your question because we haven't given that outlook yet, but I'm just telling you philosophically, like how we look at the electron and arbing the electron, whether it be an HPC, self-mining, or a managed services business, which I'm insanely excited about for you guys to see like what that business profile looks like as we continue to grow it. I think that's just how we're looking at it, and that's how we're setting up this business.
Yeah, it makes sense. And at the end of the day, it's great to even have that optionality of where do you want to focus your power and your efforts. So, Sue, I appreciate the discussion. I know obviously we're a little bit restricted with what we can say, but we appreciate you coming on here, helping to answer some questions, giving the viewers a little bit of clarity in this uncertain time. I'll kick it back to you for any closing thoughts. And if you can just remind us on the next quarterly release date, just so we can throw that in our calendars as well.
Yeah, so Q4 release should be late March sometime. I don't think we have a set date just yet, but late March, I'd say at the latest first week of April. And I think, the main takeaway is, guys, look at the numbers. Look at the numbers, do your own research. The numbers and the data do not lie. And I'm just excited to continue this conversation with you guys. And this is a new Hut, and I'm always down to chat. And again, my @BigSuey, shoot me a note if you want to continue the conversation. And yeah, let's just keep rolling.
Sounds good. Look forward to chatting again. Guys, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, ask any questions we may have missed. We'll try and get them in the next discussion. And Sue, have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for coming on here.
Thank you so much for having me. Always happy to be here.